Chapter 6: The Great Betrayal and the Dallas Nexus. The Iron Grip, having secured its international base and established its financial engine, now faced a new and unexpected threat: a concerted political attack from within the government it believed it had successfully compromised. This chapter details the collision between the syndicate's booming heroin trade, its entrenched corruption shield, and the vengeful political crusade of the Kennedy administration, a conflict that led the mob to believe its very survival depended on the elimination of the most powerful political family in America. The heroin boom and the corruption template. By the 1950s, the French Connection, orchestrated by Luciano from Italy, was pumping massive quantities of high-purity heroin into American urban centers. The sheer scale and complexity of this trafficking operation required the highest levels of police and political protection, demonstrating the Iron Grip's ability to maintain its immunity shield at the municipal level. The smuggling was not a simple street operation. It involved sophisticated international logistics and prominent figures from both the American and Sicilian mafias. The most famous example of this entrenched corruption was a major 1962 drug bust in New York, which exposed the syndicate's operational playbook, the missing evidence. Investigators seized a massive haul of heroin, reportedly 120 pounds, from the French Connection, only to have the evidence later substituted with flour. It was ultimately determined that nearly 400 pounds of pure heroin had been stolen from the evidence vault, of which the 120 pounds from the initial French Connection bust was only a part. This was the equivalent of a nearly $500 million heist in 2025 dollars. This substitution was the Obfuscate and Obstruct mandate at its peak, proving that the criminal enterprise had compromised the highest levels of law enforcement's evidence chain. Crucially, the kingpin of this operation, though identified, was never apprehended, demonstrating the ultimate effectiveness of the network's immunity shield. The structure could absorb the loss of product, provided the leadership remained free. The Kennedy Crusade and the End of the Truce. The Mafia's reliance on fixed politicians and compromised law enforcement was suddenly shattered by the election of John F. Kennedy in 1960 and the subsequent appointment of his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, as Attorney General. RFK immediately declared a crusade against organized crime, a fundamental shift in federal priorities that directly threatened the Commission. RFK quickly utilized new federal tools, such as the Wire Act of 1961, to target the mob's massive interstate gambling operations, hitting their financial foundation. However, the crusade was perceived by the Mafia not just as a policy shift, but as a profound act of betrayal. Following decades of providing great service to the U.S. government, from securing the docks during the Operation Underworld to their deep, secret involvement in the CIA's anti-Castro operations in the late 1950s and early 1960s, the mob felt that they had earned a permanent, untouchable status. The mob's role in the CIA-directed efforts to destabilize or assassinate Cuban leader Fidel Castro were particularly galling. Figures like Chicago boss Sam Giancana and Florida boss Santo Trafficante Jr. lent their expertise in assassination, poisons, and secrecy to the cause. When the Bay of Pigs failed, and the administration intensified the pressure on the mob rather than relaxing it, the anger and resentment solidified into a powerful motive for revenge. RFK's relentless pursuit, therefore, was viewed as an existential threat and a personal insult to men who believed they were secret government partners. The Dallas Nexus, The executioner's logistics. The final element needed for the Iron Grip's ultimate, vengeful action was the logistical capability, and that led directly to Dallas, Texas. Dallas, like Hot Springs before it, was a crucial, albeit lesser-known, base of operations for the national syndicate, primarily due to its economic position and exploitable local law enforcement. The operation that emerged in Dallas had the markings of a classic Iron Grip maneuver. The book storage building that provided the alleged staging ground for the assassination was, in its very nature, a classic Mafia front operation. Similar to the laundromats and vending machine companies used for cash laundering, a book or storage facility provides a legitimate, low-traffic appearance with ample space for logistics and deniable access. Crucially, the man who ultimately silenced the assassin, Jack Ruby, born Jacob Rubenstein, was not a rogue actor. He was a Dallas nightclub owner with well-established, documented connections to major mob figures in Chicago, specifically Sam Giancana's outfit, and Havana, Santo Trafficante Jr. Ruby's immediate and successful silencing of Lee Harvey Oswald ensured that the complex trail of the assassination would end abruptly, providing the ultimate eliminate and silence act of the entire Iron Grip playbook and establishing a powerful motive and mechanism for the greatest crime in American history. The final compromise: Lyndon B. Johnson and the investigative shield. The sudden elevation of Lyndon B. Johnson to the presidency immediately after the assassination provided the Iron Grip with an unexpected yet powerful shield against federal prosecution. The Sword of Damocles, LBJ's vulnerability. Prior to 1963, LBJ was deeply vulnerable to the very crusades launched by the Kennedy administration. Robert Kennedy's Justice Department had active investigations into allegations of fraud, corruption, and kickbacks related to Johnson's political allies and financial dealings in Texas. Furthermore, LBJ had known political and business associations with figures connected to the National Crime Syndicate, most notably through Texas-based racketeers. This internal federal investigation into the Vice President of the United States was, in effect, a sword of Damocles hanging over Johnson's head, a political threat managed by the same administration that the Mafia sought to eliminate. The immediate collapse of the investigation. The moment John F. Kennedy was declared dead, two profound systemic shifts occurred that perfectly served the interest of the mob. The Crusader was neutered. Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General who had sworn vengeance on organized crime, was emotionally devastated and politically marginalized. His ability to oversee and direct the Justice Department's crusade against the Mafia evaporated. The investigation ceased. Immediately upon assuming office, the internal Justice Department investigations into Lyndon Johnson and his associates were quietly and systematically stopped. This functional outcome cemented a profound structural compromise. The new president, under the pretense of stabilizing the country and avoiding geopolitical conflict, was deeply incentivized to accept J. Edgar Hoover's lone gunman conclusion. Revealing any complex domestic conspiracy would have necessitated a full, intrusive investigation of the mob, which would inevitably have reopened the files and exposed Johnson's own vulnerabilities and associations. By adopting Hoover's conclusion and swiftly establishing the compromised Warren Commission to rubber-stamp the findings, President Johnson ensured that the federal government would not turn its investigative resources against the mob. For the Iron Grip, the assassination was not just an act of vengeance. It was a successful political coup that installed a compromised executive who guaranteed the continued operation of the immunity shield at the very top of the American government.